Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WREVA Electrifying News for August of 2023. Glad you could join us, and with me, as always, we have Mr. Ian Graham, who's a little flustered, and we'll get into that, joining us from downtown Kitchener. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing okay. What a change in weather we have gotten.
That's true. That's true. It's not quite summer today, is it?
Fall.
Yeah. Also with us, as per usual, Mr. Eric Stevens joins us from Listowel. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm just out here watching my grass grow at an extreme rapid pace. My electric lawnmower has been getting a workout this year, so.
Yes, all the lawnmowers have been. I've noticed that I've cut a lot more grass in July and now August than I've ever done that I can remember. So that constant rain is really helping things stay green and lush outside for sure.
My Ego lawnmower, though, it's been going good, strong. So
excellent. Well, we've got a bunch of news for you tonight. So Ian, let's get going.
All right. So first off, we have a little discussion of the government targets, and they seem to be getting closer to being on track.
Exactly. This was a bit of a worry in the first quarter, where we were seeing numbers were down somewhat. They weren't climbing. We had a quarter where things kind of leveled off and maybe even retracted slightly. But what's good to see is that in the second quarter, numbers coming in showed that it jumped. So a bit of a spike in ownership of electric vehicles in Canada. And that number inched up closer to the mark that the federal government has put in place as to the number of EVs they'd like to see on the road by the end of 2025 and then 2025 and then 2030. So the numbers are inching up as we go along. So the uptake in the rebates for the second quarter showed increase, steady number of electric vehicles in Canada over the past 5 years. Just to recap, about 74 EV models now being sold in Canada as of 2023. And by the time next year rolls around, we're expecting another 40 on top of that. So we've got a good amount that are being added. And of course, that means more choice for the consumer. And hopefully that means more purchases. So we'll have to see if the third quarter equals the second quarter. And if we get, of course, a bump in the last quarter of the year, which is typically in most car arenas, one of the fastest selling is the fourth quarter. So there's certainly more to come, but at least we're seeing that we're getting closer to those government projections that they wanted to see us heading towards.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few factors that are involved in this too. I think, earlier in the year, there was a lot of supply chain issues with manufacturers, and they were shipping a lot of cars that weren't coming to Canada in some cases. And now we've sort of seen that in the last quarter, that sort of somewhat resolved, and now a lot more vehicles are getting shipped now, and a lot are making their way to the Canadian marketplace. And and there's of course a lot of new models in the marketplace, and a lot of manufacturers are significantly increasing their production rates as well too. So we're really starting to see the ball start to roll and start moving now with a lot of different manufacturers.
Yeah, the one thing I really thought was interesting is that next year, another 40 models are supposed to be added. And I remember us talking about when we had 40 models to be able to choose. And I mean, that was maybe, 2-3 years ago? At that time, we thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, we actually got a good selection. But now that we're at 74, and then, hopefully next year, we're going to be passing over the 100 EV mark of selection for consumers. And, it's going to be interesting as we do this podcast and as we go to some of our other news items in discussion about not only that we're going to have more electric vehicles, but of course, now we're going to get into the whole charging network aspect, because we got some interesting news on that as well. And I also heard kind of an interesting story in regards to that too. But in general, I think we're starting to see that effect of, the price of cars are coming down, they're becoming more reasonable, and we're getting more selection because not everyone's gonna, want to stick with a Tesla or a GM or a Ford. We've got the Hyundai, Kia line, Volvo's getting more involved, and et cetera, and et cetera. And then who's to say, that we also have then companies like Rivian. And where might that company kind of go with their next sort of iteration of vehicles as well? So it's great to see. All right. So moving on, in regards to this is talking about, we're getting more models, but the company CarGurus, they did a report and they're showing that the prices for EVs are actually starting to decline, in some cases up to 42%. Now, in most cases, when we're looking at some of this, this is, of course, coming more on an American side rather than Canadian side of things. But we did this year see like Tesla started doing some pretty drastic cuts with their vehicles. And of course, there was a lot of concern for shareholders and investment wise, like, oh, geez, how much are they going to make now? But the one cool thing with Tesla is they're also becoming very smart about the manufacturing aspect and lowering those costs as well as much as they can. But Ford also has lowered their costs. The Lightning, if I'm correct, has lowered the cost of their truck. The EV6, there's a 32%, decrease that way as well. And we are seeing, it was interesting this week. I did read an article about, there's EVs on the lot and they're not being sold and this and that. And of course, when you start looking into the back area of these articles, it's kind of, to a point, they're correct, but there's always something else to it that they're missing out on. And, I'm really happy to see that, the price of these things are coming down, and it's getting to that point where as they come down in price and the price of gas goes up, I saw today on the way home, $1.66. So, it's, inching back on up again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say that this is key. We've seen higher priced EVs, and of course, we as EV owners ourselves have known that it's a lower cost of ownership because there's lower maintenance and of course lower fueling costs with an EV. But when it comes to a general consumer who's buying a vehicle, they are looking at the sticker price at the dealer lot. And a lot of them will not do the calculation of how long am I going to keep the car and what type of maintenance and fuel savings am I going to oversee during the life of my car. They just don't do it because they're not used to it. But once EVs reach a parity point with the gasoline cars, then it's going to be a real simple decision for everybody because over time, the education is starting to seep in that people are realizing that these cost less to operate, and with it being equal or a similar price to the gasoline vehicle, a lot more people will be willing to take the plunge. So the quicker these prices go down, the better it's going to be for everybody. And that's something that we'll have to see how long this actually takes to get to parity. There's been a lot of talk about people saying parity is about 2 or 3 years away, but that needle tends to move too. So we haven't seen it yet, but hopefully with this story, we'll see more of this.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a few factors going on here right now. I think demand for electric vehicles is still very strong, though supply has increased as well too. So that has affected, in some cases, the pricing a little bit. That's in some cases why Ford is now, instead of spitting out 60, 70, 80,000 F-150 Lightnings a year, now they're ramping up to 150,000 F-150 Lightnings a year, which of course brings some economies of scale and also changes the supply-demand curve a little bit, so that they need to decrease the price to move all those vehicles. So there's a factor there involved. But I think there's another factor going on here as well too, like the Kia EV6. The EV6 price hasn't really dropped. I think people are just buying more affordable versions of the car. You can often buy high-trimmed versus low-trimmed versions. And just to complement Mark's point, people don't just look at the sticker price of the car, but they look at the monthly price. Oftentimes they walk into a dealership and say, "What's my payment going to be?" And right now, today, with interest rates being high, today you're walking into a dealership. Most people are financing cars. And you walk into a dealership today, now the interest rates are creeping up in some cases the 7-8% range now. And that's going to create a big sticker shock for a lot of people as well too today. So a lot of people are going to walk in and sit there and say, well, I'm not going to pay for the GT2 trim of the EV6. I'm going to go through and I'm going to step down and get a more base version maybe, or I'm not going to get as many features in order to make a more affordable version. And I think that's also putting downward pressure on some of the EV prices that are out there as well too. Is now people are now targeting more affordable versions of these vehicles because of higher interest rates. And we're starting to see that even in the gas combustion world now too, is before auto manufacturers were running in the 20 to 30 day supply range. And now that number's starting to get up now closer to the 90-day supply range. So the automotive industry in general is slowing down a little bit right now. EV demand is still very strong, but the automotive industry in general is slowing down a bit. And the high interest rates are starting to, I think, impact that on that side. So,
the joy of interest rates.
Yeah.
And we have another potential rise coming up in September.
Yep.
Oh man.
Every 6 weeks.
Yeah. I liked it when it was the other way, but anyway, it can't get negative interest rates, unfortunately.
Japan did it for a while.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that, but yeah. So they would pay you to take money out.
Well, the Central Bank of Japan would have negative interest rates to encourage banks to borrow, but of course the banks wouldn't lend out at negative. So.
No.
Yeah, because of course they would never get it back in volume.
Yeah. People would just be borrowing money all the time.
I gotta figure out
paid to take money.
Yeah, figure out a way to do the Bank of Ian and lend it out.
Yeah.
All right. So, of course, with cars and new cars kind of coming out, the aspects of the components for the cars is going to have to ramp up as well. So, to Eric, I present you your presentation here on the CAMI assembly.
Yes, so this is in our back yard here in Ingersoll, and the CAMI plant that makes the Bright Drop Zevo 600, and they're about to start production of the Zevo 400 shortly as well too. And they're adding a 400,000 square foot facility that'll assemble battery modules and stuff as well too. So GM's getting into position to ramp up production a lot more on these vehicles right now. Even CAMI today right now, they're technically running 3 shifts right now, but they're running right now they're alternating layoffs. So they're running 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off each of these shifts. And they're doing that to try to keep people on board because they know they're going to be ramping up production. So basically what they're doing is they're trying to hold people on board, trying to get people trained in assembling these new vehicles and stuff like that as well too, while at the same time preparing for a production ramp. So this is all part of that sort of big plan that they have right now to really ramp up production and increase production number of things as General Motors brings more battery capacity online. They have their plant in Lordstown, Ohio, which should be almost near full capacity now, and they have their battery plant in Spring Hill, Tennessee, coming online in September. So they should be really hopefully ramping up production in a lot of these vehicles soon. And this is all part of the supply chain to get those parts moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's GM has been. It's been a little bit longer than expected to get some of these batteries into line. We heard quite some time ago about the Lyric having difficulty in getting a number of them on, produced. We know that's changed. Eric has been able to find out some figures of the Lyric rolling out, and of course, recently we've heard about the Blazer being made in Mexico. That is now starting to ramp at something like it was every 55 seconds that one was coming off the line.
It was 65 units an hour. So.
Yeah, so it's something that has been a little bit slower than what GM had expected. They've been delaying some of the production for some time now, but hopefully as Ohio gets fully running, which we hope is now, and as Tennessee comes online, hopefully they can start producing more batteries, and these slowdowns would be a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm. I think as more and more of this production is being done, they work out the kinks, the bugs. I mean, that's incredible to hear about, almost a car a minute with something that GM's doing that way. The other aspect, though, I look at this as well is just the fact of like 300 new jobs, and this is great to see as well. We're seeing that much more with the economy, how much this is impacting that aspect. 300 jobs, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, may not seem like a lot, but I think that, still has a lot of economic benefits for the community, and of course for the taxes and everything else that way. But I think, we just mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast too, we're going to be almost next year over 100 EVs. And well, here you go. This is part of it. We need to get these things going. And, next year, 2024. So this could be part of those new EVs as well.
Yeah. You mentioned, that 300 jobs doesn't sound like a lot there, Ian, but there's kind of a little rule of thumb that says that at the final assembly plant, every job that's generated at an assembly plant typically supports another 7 to 10 jobs outside of that.
Yep.
So certainly there's carry-on effects throughout the whole supply that ripples throughout the supply chain with this as well too.
Yeah, there's the property tax collectors, there's the income tax collectors, there's no.
Well, not just that, but these battery modules need parts and supplies and components as well too, and somebody has to build those as well. So
yeah, no, exactly.
And keep in mind, this is an addition to what CAMI's already doing. As Eric was saying about the shifts are about to swing into larger production lines, faster production lines. So this is an additional 300 employees as to what CAMI was already doing.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. To see stuff like this happening. So, and it's moving, again, back to the costing again. It's also because now we're getting more of this being built, then the prices can also come down. Like there's just so many benefits to all of this that's coming about. So, all right. So this is going to be interesting. When it comes to EV charging infrastructure, how does your province rank? Mark, I'll let you take this one away. Well,
this is an interesting article that looked at the number of EVs that are on the road in a number of given states and provinces, and it looked at, okay, how many EVs are on the road compared to how many charging stations are out there amongst them. So it's obviously it's doing a division. It's coming up with the number of charging stations per EV or EV, number of charging stations it can access, and the numbers are all over the board, and they're a little bit crazy. You'll see in the photograph here that Yukon really looks well placed here with 47 electric cars being able to use 17 different chargers. Again, if there's a low amount of EVs in any given state or province, then of course your number of EV chargers looks fantastic because there's a small amount of cars amongst a small amount of EV chargers. So of course, as you start to go down the list and you look for your province, you'll notice that there are certain provinces that really look bad on the chart, like Quebec, for example. Yeah. But then you look at the number of EVs that Quebec has on the road, and it's the top number in Canada. So there is this play in this chart. I just thought it would be interesting. You can, of course, link to any of our articles with the link that'll be in the show notes, and you can go through and look at the different provinces in the list, as well as many states. But it was just kind of an interesting story. I think the numbers are skewed somewhat, not really relative to what you're going to find in the real world as to when you pull up to a charger, if it's going to be available or not. That is, of course, things that are based upon the region of the province you're in, because, of course, metro centers have more chargers, but they also have more cars. So it's really a personal thing when it comes to where you live as well. So I wouldn't take this to the bank, but it is interesting reading.
Yeah, I'm going to go so far as to say this is a terrible way to rank EV charger infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so it talks about stalls per 100 vehicles, and as you pointed out Quebec as this is saying Quebec is the worst province in Canada by the metric. This is also saying that California is also near the bottom of the list. And if you talk to any EV driver today, you'd probably say that California and Quebec probably have some of the best infrastructure that's out there for EV charging. And this list makes it look like they're the worst. So I don't think this is necessarily the best metric. And as you mentioned, it is very geographic specific. You know, most people do charge at home. So charging infrastructure, I don't know, there's got to be a better way to quantify what a good infrastructure is than stalls per 100 vehicles. Because on this list, you know, just below New Brunswick, you've got Wyoming as having a great charging.
and we know that's not the case.
No, that's not the case. Absolutely not. So.
No, we had a great time with Wyoming about 3 podcasts ago.
Exactly. But yeah, it's maybe this is part of the problem of the mass media. When someone like CBC tries to put a simple math equation in place to indicate that, you know, we've got an upper echelons of what's the best and what's the worst. In reality, it's really opposite to what they're portraying in a number of ways. So again, we as EV owners already know this, that, you know what, 95% or more of the time you're charging in your garage or driveway anyways. It's that extra 5, 4, 3% when you're on the road that you're accessing. So again, I don't think the CBC completely gets it at this point. I think a lot of them are floating the gasoline station thing that we've all been doing before EVs, and they're just continuing to drum that up. It's something that they haven't experienced themselves, and really they can't report on it properly at this point.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in the back of my head, what would be a good metric? You know, something like chargers per highway miles, something like that, or chargers per highway miles per capita, something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, as long as if you add the capita to it, then you've got a fairer, you know, metric than what the CBC has done here.
Yeah. And talking about CBC, you know, there's a couple of interesting things that kind of came up this week. And Mark, you heard me on CBC. They asked the question for EV drivers out there, how has your summer road trips been? And so different callers called in. Tim Burrows and Stephen Beta from the EV Society and Golden Triangle EV were on. And, you know, I kind of made the point that I would say 90% of people had great experiences. Here's another side of things. And this is something else that I've kind of heard now a couple of times. One from an MP who's up in the Manitoulin district. But actually, another Northern EV Society is bringing up that, for example, between Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, the fast charging infrastructure is down or damaged and is leaving people stranded to the point that they have to then call a tow truck or try and figure out some other, you know, arrangements. And so there is some definite aspects, you know, back to the charging infrastructure. And again, I look at it more, you know, not to brag about the Tesla network, but it's honestly is up like 99% of the time. I don't know that I've ever gone once to a Tesla network and gone, oh shoot, it's not working. But I have gone to other manufacturers with the CCS aspect, and even, you know, up in Espanola, there's a free level 2 charger with the Petrocan. It's been down the whole time that I was up there this last week. And, you know, could I done the CCS? Sure. But anyways, how does the charging infrastructure work? Maybe we should also put in, what about the reliability of that infrastructure as well within a certain amount of capita and also, you know, distance and everything else. But to both of yours point, 90% plus the time we charge at home. And I would even argue people that are in apartments and condos, they don't necessarily charge at home, but they seem to seem to do okay. And actually met a guy in Port Severn when I was charging. who in Toronto says they now have a pilot project where you can go to a particular parking garage that's close to them, and for $3 for the night, get free charging. Well, $3, but you can park for free as long as you're out by 8 a.m. And so again, I don't find that this story, as soon as I started reading it, and as soon as I saw that Quebec was on the very bottom, yeah, just like, no, this doesn't make sense.
That's an excellent point, though, Ian. With the off time parking in Toronto, how many of these parking garages empty out after office time or after the big event is done at a sports arena, and those remain empty overnight? Why not install a deck of chargers and advertise to the EV community to come and plug in for $3 or $5 overnight, and as long as you're out by 7 a.m., that's all you're being charged, or something like that? Because they're not using the infrastructure they have. Why not make some money on it?
And especially people in condos and apartments.
Yeah.
It's a perfect opportunity. Yeah. I can think even, sorry, Eric, I was going to say, I can even think of downtown Kitchener. There's a couple of garages that have charging there, and that would be a great incentive.
Yeah, they could definitely have dynamic pricing and encourage people to come and charge in those times. And that, when I had class in Toronto, I was finding that, you know, there was a parking garage that I found there that had an incredibly low rate for the weekend, because it was in a business district. It's typically very busy Monday to Friday, but then Friday after 6 p.m. the rates dropped drastically, and on Saturday the rates were cheap as well too, and they had free charging. So it worked out fantastic. Yeah,
exactly. Go do some EV camping in the parking garage. Yeah. All right, moving on. This is a video that Pepsi put out, and it's about, I think, 12 minutes or so, 12 to 17 minutes. I can't remember exactly, but really enjoyed this. You know, because they didn't hold back and make it all as grandiose with unicorns and everything else and rainbows. They talked about the charging infrastructure aspect and how they had to deal with their local utilities, and how much both of them learned with this aspect of things. I love the fact that Pepsi's showing like their facility is completely off the grid with solar. Again, I'm looking at all the manufacturing we have, especially along the 401, and all these empty rooftops. Come on, like, you know, yeah, we don't have the same sun as California, but, you know, we have an opportunity there. And then the other thing that I really enjoyed about this was they showed the short haul aspect, and then also the long haul. They mentioned about the recharging aspect when they come back and they're actually going downhill, and how much they regenerate that way. That was really cool. And then the part that I really enjoyed was the lady who's like, oh, I hate technology. Like, I'm nervous even with my iPhone. It took me forever to even just use my iPhone. She's like, this was so easy to figure out. And, you know, I think she also realized as well the safety component with these trucks, with all the camera aspects. So one thing I use all the time now is I literally have stopped using my mirrors for blind spots, because the camera, when you signal now on your screen, there's two things you can see. One is the actual traffic around you as little icons, and then the second is the camera showing you whether or not you have someone in your blind spot. And I don't use the mirrors anymore, because that video gives me so much more information than what my mirror ever did, and I can take my time and look at that and not have to kind of, you know, shoulder check and crank my head. For these trucks, huge safety aspect. Really thought this was just awesome to see.
Yeah, I love the video as well too, Mark, or Ian. And basically, to your point, to your cameras, actually, I just had this discussion with some people just the other day. We were talking about how, you know, maybe they should make these cameras mandatory on many of these trucks now too, going forward, because trucks have so many blind spots and stuff like that today. And the technology exists today where you can put cameras even on the trailers now that basically can eliminate and almost make the trailers almost invisible to the driver, basically, so that they can see completely around them. So that's, you know, a potential thing. One of the other things I liked about that video too is a couple of the ladies that were talking in the trucking, they were talking about how a lot of women don't go into trucking because they find it intimidating. But then they found that these Tesla semis were a lot less intimidating to use, handle, and operate. Their visibility was much better. The drivability was easier. Things like that. It was much less intimidating. And it might encourage, these types of vehicles might encourage more diverse people to get into the trucking industry as well too, because there is a shortage of people in the trucking industry that are drivers today. And the last thing I liked about this too is it was showing how Pepsi was also employing multiple solutions for different usage cases. So they had the Tesla semis for their medium to longer haul routes, but they're also using the Ford Transits, and they had a whole banks of level 2 chargers for their Ford Transit vans. And they were using also some more medium haul trucks there as well too, electric trucks, for doing stuff as well too. So they were employing all sorts of different solutions and possibilities out there to meet their different needs and their diverse needs for this distribution center, which I thought was, they're very creative and very well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this of course is a distribution center in Central California, Sacramento. So they're incentivized by the government, of course, to come up with EV solutions to reduce CO output. And be able to reduce their carbon footprint. So that's certainly part of the driving factor behind this. But just to touch on the driver again, I like the interview with the driver that indicated that driving is so much less stressful because there's, first of all, it's an automatic transmission. There's no more shifting of 18 gears to get up and down. And of course, the vehicle accelerates rapidly into traffic. So you don't have that problem where you're trying to nudge your way into a freeway of people that won't get out of your way to let you onto the freeway. And on top of it, also, they were talking about how it's just quieter in the cab. It's a nicer environment because there's not as much noise, excess noise coming from the motor that's at your feet. It's now just a quieter, more easier drive, and they feel more rested when the shift is over. So all these are pluses, small ones, but certainly any driver would be happy to get a few of those pluses on a daily route. And just to mention, Pepsico, of course, is hauling heavy loads. These are bottles of sugar water that they're traveling around with. These are full-size loads that are being moved with these tractor trailers. So again, going 400 miles in some cases on their longer routes and up to 100 miles with many stops is no small feat. Obviously, the Tesla vehicles are getting a workout, and of course, it's benefiting not only Pepsi, but this information is going back to Tesla, the manufacturer, to help them tweak the semis even more to allow it to be even more successful for the next company they introduce to this. I don't know how long it'll be. There's some sort of extended testing program that is happening with PepsiCo, but hopefully this is going to benefit the entire industry.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And to expand upon your comments there, Mark, I mean, these guys are trying something. They're trying a few different things. They're trying different technologies. And yes, it's incentivized by the government, but they're going to be putting some real numbers to this now and showing what works and what doesn't work for them. And then they can take that learnings and now expand it to other places and other facilities as these options grow. So.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned back with the noise aspect. I brought this up, and it was actually one of our podcasts as well, that the UK did a study where they put taxi drivers who were driving normally diesel vehicles into electric vehicles, and they did them all up with the probes and everything else, and they found by the end of their shift they were like way less stressed, way less exhausted. Overall, just better health for them. And I know from the years I drove that van on vegetable oil, that diesel engine is a big tank. Sound. But no, and also, Eric, like you said, I wish years ago when I started seeing cameras on cars, and especially too with when Tesla started doing stuff with to help you navigate traffic, and I was just kind of like, why is this not mandatory on especially trucks? And even so, for that matter, I'm sure there's lane keep assist now and different things like this, but I think anything that can help a trucker, especially as we're seeing the roads are so much more intense now with traffic. It's stressful overall. Yeah.
Yeah, another good safety feature to roll it to everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So, is a Diet Pepsi a lighter load?
No, it's not.
No.
Same weight.
Is that aspartame actually heavier or whatever? All right. So here we go to Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan supposedly had a pretty good amount of charging versus electric vehicles. Maybe this is part of the reason why.
Maybe, yeah. So I like this story because one of the criticisms that keep coming up about electric vehicles sometimes and stuff is not just, people talk about lithium and manganese and cobalt and stuff like that, but there's a lot of other things that go into electric vehicles today. One of the most commonly used motors today are permanent magnet motors. Of course, there's a lot of semiconductors and electronics that are used in many EVs as well too, and a lot of those require other elements out there that are not very common. They're not necessarily needed to be used in extremely high quantities, but they're still required. And right now, there's very few places in the world that manufacture some of these types of elements. And especially in North America, there's not many at all. And so now we have this company that's opening a processing facility in Saskatchewan. And I love this because they're being able to process a number of these special elements here, but also they're doing it in a very sustainable fashion as well too. There's big emphasis on sustainability, making sure that they're not using high amounts of chemicals. They're making sure that their facility is completely water neutral, things like that as well too. So they're doing this in a very sustainable fashion, while at the same time processing some of these rare earth elements that are required domestically. So I think this is a great thing for the, again, part of the North American supply chain for producing more EVs. So,
yeah, it definitely is something that is needed in a mix. Canada and its many mining zones across the country does have access to these rare earth metals that are being used in the EV production line of batteries. Having a facility that can take those raw materials and process them further so they can be used in the manufacturing process for different manufacturers is key. And I think is something that Canada should embrace, because we do have the raw minerals now. Why not build the facilities to refine them more and make it easier for input into the supply line, since we have the ability to put those plants in areas where it's a quick shipment down the CN line to drop off those materials for processing. It's a plus for Canada, and I think some other provinces should probably look into this type of thing, as Saskatchewan is taking the lead here.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is, and Saskatchewan being, I would say, to a point, roughly right middle of Canada, and where it can go to from there in terms of shipping things out. But how many, times do we hear about, electric vehicles, they have all those rare earth minerals and they're always from China, and like, no, here we go. This is excellent to see that right in our own backyard, Canada is going to be part of this. And I love, like Eric, you were saying too, is that they're trying to be very careful in terms of how they're doing this and environmental aspects on this as well. And it's interesting for the Saskatchewan government, because sometimes, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, we sometimes get into this whole like, they're not really for renewables, they're not really for electric vehicles, but more and more it's kind of showing like, no, these guys are some pretty good players for some of this stuff, especially for the future that we have coming up.
Yeah, you can't stereotype a whole province.
No,
except maybe Wyoming, but
is that going to be a province now? Because it's
But yeah. I mean, before it made sense. Canada mines many of these elements, and in many cases we were sending them over to Asia to get them processed, only to have them sent back to here again, and it just didn't make sense to do that. So now we're starting to and economically speaking, those things multiply as you do that. So when you pull these minerals out of the ground, their value is somewhat minimal. But once you process them, the value of those now all of a sudden just multiply on top of that. They're worth many times more. So oftentimes the processing is where you really get the true economic benefits for some of these things. So having this here in Canada, is just
as long as you can keep the process, clean, sustainable, it's a win for everybody. And we should look for more of this.
Yeah, for sure. And and one quick thing too, there's this thinking like with Alberta, when we hear about, oh, well, where do we mine for lithium? And it's a real problem and this and that. And yet Alberta actually has some real potential with the lithium aspects with the oil industry because of through the abandoned oil wells, etc. There's a potential there with actual lithium salts. So, it's like you say, Eric, you don't want to just sort of blacklist a province because they're really supportive of, certain things where they're now finding like, oh, geez, we actually could be part of this as well. And this is a big one. Again, and what does this mean in terms of jobs, right? Again, it comes back to that aspect as well. So economically, it looks good. All right.
Actually, I was just going to say that comes back to a story where I saw that Exxon was in talks with a number of auto manufacturers about supplying lithium. So
there you go. Yeah. It's always interesting. They got to put their hands in the stuff, right? So, all right, now this is kind of an interesting. It's been an interesting night about where our future's going because we had the rare earth part aspect of things, but the cleaner reality of electric vehicles. This article, I read it, I think, multiple times. And it's one of those articles that I've bookmarked for whenever you get the person who's like, oh, electric vehicles are worse for the environment. And yet they're not. They're, and this article and the science behind it especially is what I really enjoyed with this.
Yeah, it's something that as EV owners, you get this question all the time as to whether or not you're just deferring the emissions from your EV vehicle to for example, a coal plant that's producing electricity, even though there's no coal in Ontario. It's a question that comes up over and over. Well, a number of studies were done on this, looking at the cradle to grave scenario of what an EV costs to put into production and use and fuel. And then they looked at the gasoline industry, which of course has a lot of its own little dirty secrets that nobody is aware of on the outset. The fact that you need electricity to process gasoline, and you need electricity to run the pumps that pump it into the vehicles, and you need diesel to ship all that liquid gasoline around the country to drop off in multiple stations. So this article went through what the cradle to grave costs were in the different worlds of electric vehicles versus gasoline. So I wanted to provide this so people could make this a bookmark somewhere and just read it a couple times and keep some of the numbers in mind. If you get that question from the neighbor that says you're just running a longer dirty vehicle, you're just pushing that pollution to someplace else where it's out of your eyesight. That's not the case. Electric vehicles over the time that ownership are multiple times cleaner than gasoline vehicles when it comes to cradle to grave scenarios. So, and it doesn't take very long for the electric vehicle to overtake the gasoline vehicle when it comes to pollution and emissions and CO2 production. All that stuff is really eliminated in just a little bit over 2 years. If you own your vehicle for 2 years, you're basically equal to your carbon footprint for that ICE vehicle. And of course, anytime longer you have it, your vehicle gets greener, where of course the gasoline vehicle gets dirtier. So it's a great little exercise because we do get this question over and over when speaking to someone that's uninformed or has read an article that's misleading.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and of course, the other obvious points where, EVs are recyclable. The materials in them are recyclable, and things like that as well too. And then,
Yeah, how many times have you heard somebody say, "Well, what happens when you have to get rid of your battery after 3 years? What happens to the landfill where that battery goes to?" And it's like, the battery doesn't go to any landfill. It goes to a recycling facility, because guess what? The battery is worth money. And it's not after 3 years. It's more likely after 15 plus years. So these things are all myths. But this article does a good way of comparing them out and showing you what the reality is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing I also too, when I was reading this article, is, of course, in September, I'm going out to Vancouver for a fully charged conference, and I'm going to be on the EV and energy myths. So I got to review this article a bunch of times just to make sure I got some of these points in my head. But one of the things I always shoot back at the gas heads is, when you burnt that gas, you got to keep filling it up. It's an addiction. It's like you gotta go back, Mark, like you said. Oh, we need more electricity now to refine the current gas that we have. But there's also the water aspect. And funny enough, there's cobalt. A lot of people don't realize that to desulfur the gas, they use cobalt. The other thing is, when it comes to the electricity, and now when I heard you say pump, I was thinking the actual big oil pumps in the field. You mentioned the pumps at the stations, but I remember seeing a stat that the oil pumps in the fields use enough electricity to charge 15,000 electric vehicles a month. So times all those pumps, it's just, to me, we're really not being smart about, I had this conversation as well today about with somebody who did work in the oil industry and drives a Tesla Model Y now. And, there is still a need for the oil industry. We got to be careful about, because some of the products that we do have, we look around, it's like, oh, well, that's all part of oil. But the burning of it makes, to me, absolutely no sense anymore. And, when we use the oil for proper components, and then we probably can, as we go along, figure out more and more ways to recycle that and reuse it, just like you mentioned about the electric vehicle. The batteries don't just go to landfill. They get completely recycled. And as we've seen in other podcasts that we've done, is the second generation of those batteries are actually better, because the lithium's purified even more so than what the original was. So there's nothing but good about all this aspect of it, so.
Yeah, it's about moving towards that circular economy, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So I found this out today. Coming home from up north, I stopped in Sudbury, and this is where I saw that, we are now doing, instead of time-based billing, we are now kilowatt-hour-based billing. And that is happening right now with the Tesla Supercharger network. The other companies will probably get on board with this, I'm pretty sure. And this isn't something that has just sort of, we're just going to do this now. It's interesting that the government actually has been involved with this with Measurement Canada. And for 2 years, they've been in discussions with the companies on this aspect of it. And Tesla's kind of the first one, I think, to get on board with the kilowatt hour charging. So I couldn't tell you how many kilowatt hours I got. I have to figure out whatever, 47 cents a kilowatt hour. And then I got, I think, a bill of about $21. So whatever that math is that way. I still kind of go, ouch, when I see 47 cents a kilowatt hour compared to, even at our high end, the 17 cents. But you're on the road, it's a convenience aspect. And you know what? I also look at it as, this is also partly of what makes the company work. Mm-hmm. And for the other charging companies, I kind of hope that they go on board with this as well, and that they, start making their products actually work as well. So
that's about 45 kilowatt hours you got.
Yeah. something like that. Yeah. So if we had to do the math of a 75 kilowatt hour battery, at 47 cents a kilowatt,
That's going to be almost double that.
yeah. So,
but again, nobody's, you're charging to 80%, if not less, because you know your final destination, and you can put that into your calculation as to how much you need.
Yeah.
So, and once you get home, then you're getting it at 9 cents a kilowatt. So, that's what you kind of aim for. Get home with a buffer, plug it in overnight, and in the morning, you got yourself a full tank of electrons at a cheap rate.
Yeah.
But it still beats gasoline, even price wise. For even the top tier price.
Yeah. Yeah. So even the limited times you actually need something like this, it's still more affordable than gasoline. So
and again, I have people ask me about, well, are you upset that you're paying 47 cents a kilowatt hour? And it's like, no, I do that 5 times a year. That's it. My stats are over 96% of my charging is done at home. 96%. So a lousy 4% when I'm doing cross provincial drives or crossing into the States or going on vacation. Like, who cares? It just doesn't. It's a rounding error when it comes to 4%.
It's just funny. I'm just bringing up my charge stats, and since like a year ago, I've spent $758 on charging.
For all charging.
For all charging. Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to and that's actually a little bit more than what most people would spend, because I'm also doing these 6-hour trips to the cabin and back, especially during the summer. That adds up. And so I'm at 24% supercharger, 58% at home, and 18% other, which would be, flow chargers, other level 2 chargers, that type of thing, CCS. But the gas savings is like showing me Canadian equivalent is about $2,500.
Yeah, huge difference.
So, yeah, and minus the 700 something, it's $1,800. So yeah, big difference. So. All right. Finally, for tonight, I know we don't want to hear this word called winter, but
hockey arenas run year round, so
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yep. I haven't played hockey since March. I'm looking forward to getting back into it in October, though I'm going to be a complete blob. Because if you let yourself go in hockey for like a month or two, and then you come back to it, man, your body goes, I can't wait to see you tomorrow morning.
I can't believe you came back for another season.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But hey, the best part about this article is the fact that we're going to be able to breathe better.
Yes.
All the propane fumes and all that going in the arena.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is a city of Cambridge is purchasing 2 Olympia ice resurfacing machines from the faraway land of Elmira, which is just around the corner from where I work. So I thought this was an interesting story. I saw Mark brought it up on our Facebook page, and I thought it was a pretty interesting story. And I actually did a little more digging into these as well too. I see the story mentions that these are roughly the electric models are about 15% more than the propane models, basically, but that they roughly run about 1/10 the operating cost. So that very quickly pays itself back. And even just hearing some of the interviews of some of the people that have used some of these, that they just say they absolutely love them. They're quiet, they're easy to use, easy to maintain. They have roughly a 60-something kilowatt-hour battery pack in them, for me, it's almost a no-brainer why anybody would use the propane ones anymore, unless you don't have electricity or something in an area. But it seems pretty obvious to me that this is the way to go. And you mentioned the fumes and stuff like that too. You mean you're releasing propane exhaust fumes in a somewhat enclosed environment, and that's not good for people. And especially there are a lot of kids that play hockey and stuff like that as well too. You're spewing these fumes in these areas, and that's obviously not good for people and kids and stuff like that.
They're all kids except for Ian, of course.
Yeah. Ian's a kid at heart. And then I actually, surprisingly, just about a few days ago, I actually saw a picture the other day, and it showed a traditional ice resurfacing machine that had a transmission coolant leak on the ice, and the transmission, and it was red, right?
It looked like a murder scene.
It looked like a murder, yeah.
Nice.
So you won't have that issue with these units. So
No.
You guys probably remember though, over the commercial season over the last winter is Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid. And basically Connor shoots the puck at Wayne Gretzky and goes off and is like, hey, yeah, you want to make something of this? And then they both get on the Zambonis and it's just a race. It's slow. But I'm just thinking it would be awesome to put them on these things because they're going to probably be that much faster. It'd be kind of fun to, get them on that.
Just a shout out to Evan at Emerge Guelph. He put a comment on this post about not only are the machines saving energy by, of course, there being 1/10 the cost when it comes to propellant that runs them, but the arenas themselves, when these vehicles are when they're propane and they're releasing the gas after it's been burnt, they have to run their HVAC systems at the arenas at a certain pace in order to vent out that exhaust.
Oh, yeah.
So their fans are running at a certain speed. The circulation of air has to run at a certain speed. They're able to reduce all that in operating costs because now they're not emitting that harmful chemical into the air. It's now gone and it's not there in the first place. So you're getting an operational savings for the arena itself.
Yeah. And the passerbys outside can, deal with the emissions there.
Nothing to come out once they go. So hopefully this is a success for Cambridge, and this will be, these two will be the first of many that will start filling Cambridge arenas as the retirement cycle of their old ice surfacing equipment ages and completes.
Mm-hmm. The City Kitchener supposedly has one in order of these as well. So great to see. I got to bring up, and it's a kind of a personal note, I guess. I played hockey since I was 2. My dad put me on skates, and we had a pond in the back that would freeze in the wintertime. And I have a picture of myself at 2 years old with a hockey stick and skates, learning to skate. So I've been playing hockey for quite some time. But my dad coached a lot, and my dad also spent a lot of time as a youth playing hockey, to the point he was in a league just below the Leafs playing goal. He was actually back in the day when they had no mask. But the one thing that my mom and I have always wondered about, and of course propane and gas engines, etc., for Zambonis have always been used all this time. My dad passed, and one of the issues he had was pulmonary fibrosis, which to this day is not a condition that we really understand, or we don't really know what causes it necessarily. And what pulmonary fibrosis is basically it's the hardening of the cells in your lungs so that it doesn't absorb oxygen the same way. So near the end of my dad's life, he had the oxygen tank, and I've actually talked to a few other people who also have the oxygen tanks, and if they've got this pulmonary fibrosis, and just to see background with their lives, because again, as I stated, it's not something that really is very well understood. So my mom and I, we've always kind of wondered, there's something with the particulate matter with the arenas and the Zambonis. And of course, how many years back that my dad was playing hockey, that the ventilation systems would not have been the same in the arenas as well as what we have today. Yeah. So, it's just something that we've always kind of wondered about, with that aspect. So, but this is a great article, and I can imagine some point we might have Zamboni races with these. This is kind of fun.
You know, EV acceleration is so much better. I wonder these are much faster on the ice. We'll have to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, with that, that's our last story, correct, Ian?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Very good, very good. So we would like you to, of course, if you want to see any of the articles, they'll be in the notes below in the video. You can link to them and go read them at your pleasure. We would also ask you to give us a thumbs up on the video and press that subscribe if you would like to be alerted every time we put one of these out onto the internet. And I would also like to raise a plug for our group, WREVA. We are putting on one of the largest electric vehicle shows for National Drive Electric Week coming up on Saturday, September 30th. We have over 160 registrants at this point. We'd like to see you register and bring your EV out and talk to the public about the experience you've had with your EV. We'll have many people coming to this. We're thinking hundreds, and we would love for you to join us on that Saturday. So please sign up. The link again will be down below where you can sign a registration page to join us. It's absolutely free, and we'd love to see you on that Saturday. With that, any closing words from you, Eric?
Nope, none for me, Mark. I'm good.
Okay. And Ian, any closing words for you about your hellish drive today?
Oh, you know, don't drive home on a long weekend. Like, you know, it really goes to show how many, you know, bank employees and government employees are away on vacation and then having to come home, you know, but yeah, not fun. But I realized, you know, for that last article, I was wearing the right shirt of bench because I'm a great bench warmer, you know. But no, I'm going to give, actually, I do have to give a bit of a shout out to a new friend, Pete. As I mentioned him, he was a former oil worker, and I met him in Sudbury at the Charger, and I noticed his plates were from British Columbia. And funny enough, Pete's going to be at the Fully Charged show in September, so he's like, "Well, I'm going to have to come out and see you out there." And but he made a point to me that was interesting, is that he tries to not fly anywhere, and so his daughter will be out in Ottawa, and he will drive from British Columbia out to Ottawa, and then sometimes they go out east. He sometimes goes down through the States, and he says, "You know what? The cars now, like," and he kind of made the same point, like we were talking about, you know, the with the diesel engines and how much stress you have with all that stuff. And he goes, road trips now are not that bad. Like, it's comfortable in the car, you know, and it keeps in the lanes and it's quiet and everything. It's a different thing. He's like, if I don't have to fly, I actually really enjoy it because I get to see lots of cool scenery. And yeah, you get there quicker with flying, but this is, you know, a bit of a trade-off. So anyway, so shout out to Pete for doing that. And of course, he asked me if I was going to be driving out to BC. I'm picking up a new Model Y, hopefully last week of August, first week of September. Still trying to figure out a name for it, being a Rush fan, Red Bar Tesla. I'm debating on Model YYZ, if you know. So
that works.
It works if you're a Rush fan. And again, moving pictures, all of them, Red Barchetta, Red Barchetta. Anyways, okay, I'll stop there. But anyways, but yeah, I look forward. Actually, I will say, I look forward to seeing everyone out at the National Drive Electric Week, because I unfortunately had to miss it last year. And you know, I'm crossing fingers for some really good weather, and crossing fingers that we're going to get a huge turnout, because we put on the biggest and the best, and we're awesome.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you, Eric, for joining us this evening. And I'd like to thank you for watching. Again, give us that thumbs up, press that subscribe, and we'll get together in about another month and do another electrifying news for you. So thanks, everyone. Have yourself a great evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you're watching this. Bye-bye.